The sun was dipping low when I finally turned off the main highway, the cruiser humming beneath me. It had been another long day, 2 arrests, a pile of paperwork, and not enough hours in the shift. I was still in uniform, weary but relieved to be heading home. My mind drifted to the usual evening routine: dinner with my wife, helping my daughter with her favorite puzzle, maybe catching a ball game if sleep didn't claim me first. But as I turned onto our street, something was wrong. I spotted my wife on the front lawn, arms around our daughter, who was sobbing into her chest. My heart lurched. I threw the car into park and bolted out. "What happened?" I demanded, jogging over. My wife looked up, her face tight with anger and fear. "It's gone. Her monitor. That woman from the HOA took it." I blinked, unable to process it at first. "What do you mean, took it?" She stormed up, snatched it right off the porch while Emily was playing, said it was an eyesore, and walked off with it like she owned the place. I looked down at my daughter, Emily's small chest heaving, tears streaking her cheeks. Her condition meant she couldn't be without that heart monitor for long. It was more than a lifeline. It was the only thing keeping us from the edge of constant fear. Rage flared in my gut, but I swallowed it down. Years in law enforcement had taught me the value of control. Still, my pulse thundered in my ears. I glanced toward the street where that HOA president, Karen Myers, lived in her pristine white house. My wife met my eyes. She doesn't know who she just messed with. I exhaled slowly, already moving. She's about to. Emily was born on a crisp autumn morning that should have been filled with joy, but instead was shadowed by alarms and frantic doctors. Her heart had struggled to sustain her from the start, the monitors in the NICU flashing red more than green. We learned her diagnosis in sterile conference rooms with too many specialists and too few answers. A rare congenital heart defect that would never fully heal. Surgeries would buy her time, medication would help manage the strain, but constant vigilance would be the true cost of her fragile life. As a sheriff, I thought I understood stress, danger, and what it meant to watch someone's life hang in the balance. Nothing prepared me for this. From the moment Emily came home, my badge meant less than the blinking heart monitor on our nightstand. I became a father who slept in shifts, eyes trained on the monitor's soft green glow while my wife rested. The steady rhythm of beeps became the soundtrack of our home, a sound that brought reassurance or dread depending on its pace. Life with a child like Emily is a life on high alert. Every outing is measured by how far we are from emergency care. Every meal, every bedtime is a careful dance of medication schedules and physical limits. She can't run like the other kids, can't stay out too long in the sun, and can't be without her portable heart monitor for even a short time. It's the only way we know if her heart is under stress before it's too late. Despite it all, Emily is a light in our world. She has a smile that can melt even the hardest heart, a laugh that fills the room, and a spirit that refuses to be caged by her body's limitations. She loves puzzles, art, and sitting on our porch swing where she can watch butterflies dance through the garden. That porch became her safe space, a place where she could feel part of the world without risk. Her heart monitor always nearby, sometimes in her lap, sometimes clipped to her waistband, was a quiet companion, no different than a child's beloved toy, though far more vital. We moved into this neighborhood 3 years ago for the schools and the promise of a tight-knit community. It wasn't long before we discovered the other side of that promise. The HOA president, Karen Myers, ran the association like a tiny fiefdom, obsessed with appearances and property values. She had a long list of petty grievances and an army of passive-aggressive emails to enforce them. To her, anything that disrupted the cookie-cutter perfection of the neighborhood was an affront. It started with warnings about Emily's medical equipment being visible on the porch. Then came citations about leaving the porch swing cluttered when Emily's blankets were out. My wife and I explained, patiently at first and then with frustration, that these items weren't clutter, they were necessary. The ADA protected our daughter's right to reasonable accommodation, and I reminded Karen of that fact more than once. Still, her disapproval lingered in tight smiles and clipped words. We tried to keep the peace, choosing our battles carefully. Our lives were too full of real struggles to waste energy on neighborhood drama. But I knew deep down that Karen's intolerance was a spark waiting for dry tinder. And now, standing on my lawn, staring at my devastated daughter and hearing my wife's trembling voice, I realized the spark had caught. Karen had crossed the line from nuisance to threat. This wasn't about property values anymore. This was about my daughter's life, and I wasn't going to let it go. The heart monitor wasn't just a piece of equipment. It was a lifeline, a silent guardian standing between stability and the terrifying unknown. For Emily, whose heart struggled to maintain rhythm and strength, it was the only way we could detect trouble before it became irreversible. It tracked her heart rate, oxygen levels, and alerted us to dangerous shifts that might not show outward signs until too late. We used a portable model, small enough for a child to carry, with a sturdy transmitter and a soft band that wrapped gently around her chest. It linked wirelessly to our home system, sending data to an app that my wife and I checked constantly. When we were outside, the portable receiver stayed close, usually on the porch table, clipped to Emily's chair or in her small backpack. That device had saved her life more times than I cared to count. Subtle changes on the monitor had caught impending cardiac episodes before symptoms appeared. Once, during a quiet afternoon, the monitor alarmed while Emily seemed perfectly fine. We rushed her to the hospital where doctors stabilized her just in time. Without it, we would have lost her. It wasn't a luxury. It wasn't optional. It was as essential as air. Because of its critical role, we worked tirelessly to normalize it for Emily. We didn't want her to feel different or broken. The monitor was explained to her as her super helper, a special tool that kept her safe. She accepted it with a level of courage that astonished me, carrying it proudly, even when other kids asked questions. On that day, when Karen took the monitor, it wasn't just an act of arrogance or spite. It was an act of recklessness that placed my daughter's life in jeopardy. Every second without that device increased the risk of missing a warning sign. Emily's stress and crying only made matters worse, as emotional distress could strain her fragile heart. As a father, I was terrified. As a sheriff, I was furious. Karen had made a choice, a deliberate, dangerous choice, without understanding the consequences. But understanding or not, there would be consequences, because some lines should never be crossed, and this one was personal. Karen Myers had been a thorn in our side since the day we moved into the neighborhood. From the very first HOA meeting I attended, I could sense the type of person she was. She carried herself like royalty, presiding over a kingdom of manicured lawns and beige conformity. She wore a smile that never touched her eyes and had an unnerving ability to turn any discussion into a crusade about protecting property values. At first, we kept our distance, hoping that being cordial and unobtrusive would spare us from her attention. For a while, it worked. But then Emily came home from the hospital, her surgeries behind her, but a lifetime of monitoring ahead. That was when Karen's thin veneer of tolerance began to crack. It started subtly, a note taped to our door about unsightly items left on the porch. We assumed it referred to the folding chair and small table we kept there for Emily to sit outside safely. We politely explained that the chair and her heart monitor setup were medically necessary. Karen's response came not with empathy, but with a dismissive nod and a condescending suggestion that we keep such things out of view when not in use. Over the months, the complaints escalated. We received formal citations for having a small umbrella on the porch, which provided shade for Emily. We were chastised for leaving her portable oxygen backup tank visible for a short period. Each time, we responded with documentation from our doctor and references to ADA protections. Each time, Karen acted as though we were the problem, an unsightly blemish on her vision of suburban perfection. I confronted her once after she accosted my wife at a community event, loudly asking why we didn't just move somewhere more suitable for your situation. I reminded her, in no uncertain terms, that my daughter had every right to live here and that discrimination against a disabled child was illegal. Karen smiled thinly and said, "Of course, Sheriff, I wouldn't dream of violating any laws." But her eyes burned with resentment. The final straw came at a recent HOA meeting. My wife had attended to request a simple accommodation, allowing a more permanent setup for Emily's medical gear on the porch. Karen shot it down immediately, citing vague aesthetic concerns. She went so far as to say, "We can't have every family displaying their personal problems out front. It affects everyone's home value. The room fell silent, the cruelty of her words hanging heavy in the air. That was 2 weeks before the day she snatched the heart monitor. Looking back, I saw the pattern clearly. Karen didn't care about laws or compassion. She cared about control and appearances. In her eyes, Emily's needs were an inconvenience, a disruption to her curated world. And now, by taking that monitor, she had crossed from petty harassment into something far more dangerous. She had taken my daughter's lifeline, boldly, deliberately, and for that, there would be no polite conversation. There would be justice. It was supposed to be a quiet afternoon. The sun was warm but not too hot, and Emily had begged to sit on the porch swing with her coloring books. My wife set her up carefully, arranging the cushions and making sure her heart monitor was clipped in its usual spot on the little side table within easy reach. The monitor blinked its reassuring green light, casting a small glow beneath the soft shade of the umbrella. Emily hummed as she colored, her bare feet swinging gently in the air. My wife was inside, watching through the window while preparing a snack. It all happened in the span of a few minutes. Karen strode up the walkway with her usual clipped pace, her ever-present clipboard in one hand. She didn't knock or announce herself, just marched straight toward the porch. My wife caught sight of her through the glass and rushed to the door, but by the time she opened it, Karen was already looming over Emily. "What is this junk doing out here again?" Karen snapped, her voice loud and sharp. Emily froze, her crayon poised mid-stroke. "It's my helper," she whispered, her small voice barely audible. Karen scoffed. "This is not acceptable. We've been over this. It makes the neighborhood look like a hospital ward." Before my wife could intervene, Karen reached down and grabbed the heart monitor off the table. The strap caught for a moment, and Emily let out a frightened cry as the device jerked away. The blinking light turned red as the connection was disrupted. "Stop!" my wife shouted, sprinting toward the porch. "You can't take that. It's medical equipment. She needs it." Karen turned with the monitor clutched in her hand, her expression cold and triumphant. "Then keep it out of sight. We have rules." My wife blocked the steps, trying to reason with her, but Karen brushed past, her grip tightening around the device. Emily was now sobbing, her chest heaving with shallow, panicked breaths. Without the monitor feeding live data, we had no way of knowing if her heart was slipping into danger. The crying only worsened the risk. By the time I pulled into the driveway minutes later, the scene was chaos. My wife was on her knees, cradling Emily, trying to calm her. Neighbors peeked out from windows and doorways, whispers rippling through the street. Karen had disappeared back to her house, the stolen monitor still in her possession. Hearing my wife's frantic account, seeing Emily's tear-streaked face and trembling body, something inside me snapped. Years of training demanded control, but this was my little girl. Her life had been jeopardized by an act of sheer arrogance. I kissed Emily's forehead and promised her it would be okay. Then I stood, adjusted my uniform, and started walking down the street. I wasn't going to knock as a neighbor. I wasn't going to plead as a father. I was going to handle this as the law, and Karen was about to understand exactly what that meant. I stood there for a long moment, fists clenched at my sides, the fury boiling beneath my skin, demanding release. But fury wouldn't help my daughter. Fury wouldn't get the monitor back. I knelt beside Emily again, smoothing her hair and whispering reassurances, my voice steady, though my heart pounded. "It's going to be okay, sweetheart. I promise." She hiccuped through her tears, trying to believe me. My wife knelt opposite me, her eyes wide and glistening with helpless rage. I could see the words forming behind her lips, the urge to scream, to storm across the street, to claw the device back with her own hands. I took her trembling hands in mine. "Stay here. I need you to keep Emily calm. No matter what happens, keep her inside, near her meds and the phone." She swallowed hard. She could have. "I know." I squeezed her hands tighter. "I know exactly what she did, and I will handle it." I rose to my full height, adjusting my duty belt and smoothing down my shirt. The badge on my chest caught the sunlight. It was more than a symbol today. It was a reminder of who I was and what I stood for. I wasn't just a father walking over in anger. I was the sheriff of this county, sworn to uphold the law. I turned to glance at the cluster of neighbors now gathered in doorways and on sidewalks, their eyes flicking between my house and Karen's across the street. They'd heard enough. They knew. Word would spread fast, but that didn't matter. I took one steadying breath and started down the sidewalk. Each step was measured, deliberate, not rushed, not wild. I would not give Karen the satisfaction of seeing me unhinged. She wanted to play HOA tyrant. She wanted control. She had no idea she'd just picked a fight with the wrong man. I crossed the street with each step echoing in my mind. The sun glared off Karen's immaculate white house, every shrub trimmed within an inch of its life, the flag on her porch hanging stiff in the still air. I could see her through the window, moving about, unaware of the storm heading her way. I took the front steps 2 at a time and knocked, loud and firm. No response. I knocked again, this time adding the weight of my voice. "Karen Myers, open the door." A curtain twitched. Another beat of silence. Then the lock clicked, and the door opened a few cautious inches. Karen's face appeared, composed but wary. Her gaze flicked to my badge, her expression tightening. "Sheriff Turner," she said coolly, "I hope you're not here to harass a private citizen." I kept my voice level, my eyes steady. "You know why I'm here. You took my daughter's heart monitor. You will return it, now." Her chin lifted in defiance. "That device was in violation of HOA guidelines. I've warned your wife about leaving medical equipment in plain view. I have every right to remove items that violate community standards." My jaw clenched, but my tone remained icy calm. "You have no such right. That equipment is protected under federal law. ADA regulations you've been informed about more than once. What you did constitutes theft, Karen. And far worse, you endangered a disabled child's life." A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face, quickly masked with arrogance. "You're overreacting. If your daughter is that fragile, perhaps she shouldn't be exposed outside." That was it. The line she should never have crossed. I took a step forward, the door now fully open as she instinctively backed up. "Let me be perfectly clear," I said, my voice dropping low. "You are in possession of stolen medical equipment. You interfered with life-saving care. As sheriff, I am giving you one chance to hand it over before I proceed with an arrest." Karen's bravado cracked, color drained from her cheeks. I was just enforcing the rules." "You don't make the law," I said sharply. "And you certainly don't override the Americans with Disabilities Act with your HOA bylaws. You are not above the law, Karen." She hesitated, her mouth opening and closing as if searching for an argument, but the weight of the moment pressed down on her. The neighbors watching from across the street, my uniformed presence, the realization that this was no longer an HOA spat, it was a criminal matter. Finally, with trembling hands, she turned and disappeared inside. I waited, every second stretching thin. Then she returned, clutching the heart monitor awkwardly, as if it might bite her. "I didn't mean any harm," she muttered, thrusting it toward me. I took it carefully, inspecting it for damage. The blinking green light had returned. Relief swept through me, tempered by the simmering anger still burning beneath the surface. "This isn't over," I said, meeting her eyes. "You will be hearing from my department. You endangered a child. You committed theft. You'll answer for it." Her lips quivered. "You wouldn't." I leaned in slightly. "You clearly don't know me at all." Without another word, I turned and walked back down the steps, the monitor secure in my grip. I could feel the eyes of the neighborhood following me, silent witnesses to the fall of the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA. When I crossed back to my house, Emily was waiting inside, her face still streaked with tears. My wife opened the door, her breath catching when she saw the monitor in my hands. I knelt by Emily, clipping it back to her as gently as possible. The soft beep resumed, steady and strong. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "Daddy fixed it. You're safe now." But as I held her close, my mind was already moving. This wasn't about a personal vendetta. It was about justice, about ensuring no other family would face what we had that day. Karen Myers had overstepped, and now the law was coming for her. The next morning, I sat in my office at the sheriff's department, the heart monitor incident still fresh in my mind. As much as every instinct screamed to take immediate action, I knew I had to handle this the right way. There could be no hint of personal retaliation. The law had to speak for itself. I called in my deputy, explained the situation fully, and recused myself from any direct involvement in the case. I provided my statement, my wife's written account, and the evidence of ADA violations and theft. The deputies would handle the rest. Within hours, an official report had been filed. Karen Myers was served a notice of pending charges, theft of medical equipment, endangerment of a disabled child, and violation of federal disability protections. The case was airtight. Word spread quickly. In a neighborhood as tightly wound as ours, gossip traveled faster than official notices. By the time deputies arrived at Karen's door, most of the community was already whispering about the sheriff's daughter and the HOA president, who had finally gone too far. Karen's arrest was carried out calmly, by the book. She was taken into custody, processed, and later released pending a court date. I stayed far from the scene, ensuring that no one could accuse me of using my position for personal revenge. I didn't need to. The law spoke clearly enough on its own. At the next HOA meeting, the atmosphere was electric. Karen arrived flanked by her remaining allies, but the tide had turned. Neighbors who had once feared her now spoke openly about their disapproval. Parents voiced their outrage that any child, especially one as vulnerable as Emily, could be treated with such cruelty. A motion was raised to remove Karen as HOA president. The vote was swift, decisive, and public. She left the meeting in silence, her former authority stripped away by the very community she had once ruled with an iron fist. In the days that followed, my wife and I received messages of support from neighbors we barely knew. Offers of help came in, along with heartfelt apologies from those who admitted they had been too intimidated to speak out before. For Emily, life slowly returned to normal. Her smile came back, her trust in the safety of her world gradually restored. For us, the monitor's steady beeps sounded a little sweeter, a little stronger. And for Karen Myers, the legal process had only begun. But one thing was certain. No amount of HOA power would shield her from the consequences of what she had done. Not anymore. Weeks passed, but the memory of that day lingered in our home like a faint bruise that refused to fade. Emily slowly regained her sense of safety, though for a while she would glance toward the porch with hesitant eyes, her small hand unconsciously reaching for the heart monitor even when it wasn't needed. My wife and I worked to restore her trust, spending more time outside with her, showing her that the world beyond our door was still hers to enjoy. The neighborhood transformed in subtle but noticeable ways. Without Karen's grip on the HOA, a collective breath seemed to release. Neighbors who had once avoided our gaze now stopped to chat, offering smiles and words of encouragement. A retired couple down the street brought Emily a box of sidewalk chalk and an apology. Another family volunteered to help us set up a more permanent ADA-compliant space on the porch, shielded from both weather and prying eyes. Karen's legal case moved forward slowly, as such matters do, but the weight of public opinion had already delivered its verdict. No one spoke in her defense anymore. The HOA, now under new leadership, issued a formal apology and pledged to review all policies to ensure full compliance with disability rights. For me, the hardest part was balancing the roles of father and sheriff. The law had guided my actions, but the father in me had struggled to remain patient as the wheels of justice turned. There were moments, late at night, when I replayed the confrontation in my mind and wondered if I had been too controlled, if I should have said more, done more. But then I would hear the soft beeping of Emily's monitor through the baby monitor we still kept in our room, steady and reassuring, and I would remind myself that the outcome mattered more than the moment. The experience left me with a renewed sense of purpose. In my years of service, I had fought for many things: justice, safety, the rule of law. But this was personal. This was a reminder that those principles mattered just as much at home as they did on the streets. No title, no position of power should ever place someone above the law, especially when the vulnerable are at risk. One evening, as Emily sat on the porch coloring again, her monitor quietly humming beside her, she looked up at me and smiled. "Daddy, the mean lady can't take my helper anymore, right?" I knelt beside her, kissed her forehead and whispered, "No, sweetheart, not ever again." And in that simple moment, I knew we had reclaimed something far more precious than a piece of equipment. We had reclaimed peace, trust, and the certainty that, in our home and in our hearts, justice would always have a place.